Minnesota wins this one, hangs on in this one, 27-25. It feels like the Packers are that team that, man, you could just never count them out. But Minnesota's top 5 graded players in this one. Defensive tackle Harrison Phillips is at the top of the list with an 80.5. Linebacker Blake Cashman is playing really well, a 79.5. Wide receiver Jalen Naylor with a 78.6. Guard Dalton Reisner with a 75.9, and then wide receiver Justin Jefferson with a 75.8. Quarterback Sam Darnold in this one. Not his best, not his worst, 69.4 overall grade. On Green Bay's side, linebacker Edgerrin Cooper, who we want to talk about linebackers that are playing well this season. Just an unbelievable job from Edgerrin Cooper in his rookie year, giving them a lot of faith to put even more on his plate going into 2025. An 80.4 overall grade in this one. Behind him, wide receiver Romeo Doubs with a 76.5. Running back Josh Jacobs, a 71.8. Offensive tackle Zach Tom, a 71.3. Guard Elkin Jenkins with a 71.3. And then quarterback Jordan Love with a 72.3 in this one. Lots to talk about here, but what was your stat that told the story?
Yeah, I think there's several things to talk about here, but I'm going to start with the Packers once again getting off to a slow start. And you're looking at a team, the first half of this game, 4.8 yards per play. 5 first downs, a 58.1 offensive grade, minus 0.405 EPA per play in this first half, and just 2 explosive plays. One of them, a Josh Jacobs run that went for like 12, 13 yards on 3rd and 1. The other was a Tucker Kraft screen that put him into scoring position. Look, where we're at with the Packers right now, we've talked about games where they get off to great starts, but the 4 games where they've played the Lions and the Vikings are 4 of their 5 lowest graded offensive first halves of their season. The other one, the 5th one, was the Rams game where they were, I believe, down at halftime, and then the Rams started turning the ball over, kind of gave them the game. They, in their biggest games, in these 4 games, that in theory, these are the games that could have won you the division or gotten you more into that contention, and not being, well, they're the best third-place team in football, which is something, but they have to get off to better starts against elite teams like this, right? We've seen it in other games where they've gotten off to great starts. I think about the Cardinals game where they just blew them out the water in the first half, but you have to do it against these types of teams, especially when you're talking about the Lions and the Vikings being 2 of the best offensive teams in the first half of games. So I think before we get into, the scheme, and I have some of that stuff and the reasons that Brian Flores won him this game and all that, I think the Packers, when they play playoff teams, and they very well could play either of these 2 teams again, the Vikings or the Lions, they have to come out better. They cannot ask Jordan Love to come back from double-digit deficits against teams like this, because it's just not going to happen.
Which is interesting because they're still a top 10 team, like you said, in first half points this year.
It's just in these big games specifically.
Right, no, and I think it's a great call out. I think it's a good call out, because I have pointed out before how this team has the ability to start out of the gate really hot, specifically on the ground. Like, they've been able to really set the tone exactly the way that they've wanted to. They've been able to control the clock, especially in the first quarter and their first couple of drives. But you're right. Obviously, against these teams, these specific teams, you need to be able to continue to do it. And so maybe we'll see them bounce back and get closer to what we have seen when they faced other teams this year. But I think it's pretty likely that we get a matchup between the Packers and one of these other 2 teams at some point next month, which can't wait to watch. Packers in coverage was something that really stood out to me in this game. 49.9 overall coverage grade as a team, 0.329 EPA per pass allowed here for the Green Bay Packers. It was just a struggle. And it's, to be fair, a struggle for every team that faces the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, this is a really tough team to cover. They've got so many different options. But even beyond that, they're so damn creative, man. I mean, what was that? That was it. The Jordan Addison touchdown was the one where it's like, all right, he's running a little comeback, or he's running a little curl route, and then, just kidding. See, here's a spin move. Now I'm in the end zone. Now I'm catching it right over your shoulder. It's one of those things where not every offense even thinks about being that creative. A lot of them are much more streamlined and like, okay, we've got these concepts. It's a dagger concept. It's a Yankee concept. It's a sail concept. We got to run it to the, and then you as an offensive coordinator, you take those concepts and you say, okay, now it's about me calling those concepts at the right time to attack defenses the right way. The Vikings and Kevin O'Connell have fully empowered their playmakers to just make plays. And I think that route was just a great example of them being incredibly creative. And it's something that we praise Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs for. They do what you would never think of. And after it happens, you go, That's brilliant. I do that on the playground. In fact, I have. I remember when I was in third grade, I ran that exact route, right? I mean, like, hey, when you think about that touchdown, how simple is that to think, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run a curl, and then I'm going to stand up as if I'm not getting the football. And then the second that defender sort of stands up as well and lets his guard down, boom, I'm going to spin move right behind it. Like, we've all thought of that on the playground. Anybody who's played playground football has thought of that route. The Vikings are doing it in NFL games with everything on the line. And it's what's taken the Chiefs to the next level. And I think it's what's helped part of what has helped take the Vikings to the next level and how creative that they're playing. But the Packers coverage, they just weren't ready for it. So I'm praising the Vikings, but at the same time, the Packers coverage was not ready for it. And it's a unit that has played well at times throughout the season, but really struggled in this past game, as evidenced by that coverage grade. What about most impressive and most disappointing?
Yeah, and real quick, last point on that too is there was 100 graphics shown yesterday about how well the Vikings threw the ball over the middle of the field, which is true. They're one of the best teams over the middle in the league. It's a Kevin O'Connell thing. It's a Shanahan offense, a staple, right? But the immediate thought too for me was the Packers, this is still their biggest issue, is covering over the middle at linebacker, at safety. And I know they got some guys playing well. McKinney's had a great year. Edgerrin Cooper's coming on lately, but against the same thing, against the Lions and the Vikings, they do the two things that you cannot do. They get off to slow starts, and they give up way too much over the middle. And I think that's why they're clearly third behind these two teams right now, because when they play them head to head, they do all the things on offense and defense that you just cannot have against those two teams. But my most impressive here, I'm going with Brian Flores. What a game plan he put together. Trevor, he blitzed Jordan Love on 74% of his dropbacks. 74%. Jordan Love, 61.5 passing grade against the blitz, 84.3 when he wasn't blitzed. And for me, I thought it was kind of similar to, remember earlier in the year when the Vikings played the Texans, and they blitzed C.J. Stroud a lot because, well, Brian Flores will do that. And it wasn't so much that they got to Stroud. I don't even think the pressure rate was 40% in that game, but you could feel the speeding up, right? You could feel like it was sped up, or there's times I thought in this game where Jordan Love took too long. We don't have answers. Like everything in the Packers passing game was too vertical, and we need some quick game. And I need Jordan Love to get into his drop and play with a little more timing, because there's times where you can see it. He wants to hop back into that drop back. He wants to be deep in the backfield. He wants to see the whole field and rip the ball downfield. This wasn't a game for that. This wasn't a game where they were going to get vertical on Minnesota, because Brian Flores was speeding them up the same way. The other thing, too, I thought was interesting, and there was something I kind of felt like, especially watching a Justin Jefferson on the other side. The Vikings ran 22 man coverage snaps in this game, their second most of the season. Brian Flores has gone a lot more zone blitz with this team that he has, because he doesn't have a whole lot of elite corners, right? Byron Murphy was pretty good. We're patching it up with Stephon Gilmore, but against man coverage, Jordan Love was 5 for 12 with 41 yards. And I think we're getting a thing here where I know Matt LaFleur said it made him sick about all the questions about not having, people saying he doesn't have a wide receiver one and we do things by committee and we got a bunch of good players. But, man, it really helps to have a Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson in spots like this that can win one-on-one. And I don't think the Packers have that guy. Obviously, Christian Watson's hurt. Romeo Doubs is decent. Jaden Reed, I'm just going to skip to most disappointing. Jaden Reed here, 4 targets, 1 catch, 6 yards, had a drop on an early big play in the first quarter, and 43.2 receiving grade versus man coverage this year. And I like Jaden Reed a lot. I think he's a really good player. I think he can do a lot of things. He's very versatile, but you have to win one-on-one when the situation, comes in front of you. And Brian Flores challenged these Packers wide receivers. And for the most part, I think from 3/4 of the game at least, they really didn't have a whole lot of answers. And I just start to wonder when, and I know we're going to talk about in the offseason their needs being interior offensive line and further improvement in the secondary, maybe at corner, but how high is wide receiver on that list, considering Christian Watson's injuries and the fact that the rest of these guys are solid but not elite players?
One, I want to go back to the Brian Flores, and something that I love about Flores is sort of the point that you made there with how often he blitzes. And obviously the passing grade versus the blitz is going to be a little bit lower than when there's not blitzes there. But I think a underrated aspect of how aggressive Brian Flores is not just the fact that it works when he pressures. It's that then when you don't pressure them, you get a little bit of the seeing ghost thing. Now, not necessarily in this game. Like Love had a couple of plays where that could have been the case, but overall pretty good passing grade when he was not blitzed. But you're really just hoping for maybe that one or two plays when you don't blitz for them to just panic a little bit and they go, all right, somebody's behind me, like somebody's coming up behind me and nobody's there because that person's actually in coverage somewhere, and then you're panicking a little bit, and then you're not reading the pocket the way that you need to. So Flores has been incredible. He's done an awesome job as a defense coordinator here for this team. Most impressive, I'll go with Sam Darnold. I think there were a lot of things to be impressed with this Minnesota Vikings team, but I am going to go with Sam Darnold. I think that people might be shocked about that given his overall PFF grade, but I still think it was strong. And again, you can't think of PFF grades necessarily like grades in school. Like a 69.3, like that's a solid grade. And he wasn't perfect in this one. He had a turnover-worthy play. He had 2 big-time throws, though. And what I liked about Sam Darnold, 21 first downs in this game. The only quarterback who had more first downs this week was Joe Burrow, and that, as we know, every single Cincinnati game is all on Joe Burrow's shoulders no matter what, and he even got to go to overtime, so that numbers inflated a little bit there. So just a ton of first downs, getting first downs with his arm, trusting Sam Darnold to be the one to move the chains. I thought that continued to be impressive in a close divisional matchup that meant a ton, and I loved seeing what we saw afterwards with him coming into the locker room and the team just celebrating like it felt like they won the Super Bowl, right? And they just believe so much in Sam Darnold. We talked about it before on this show. I don't think that guy is leaving the building. I don't think he's getting out of Minnesota. I think that now we are going to talk about what happens with JJ McCarthy, and I don't think they're going to be quick to trade JJ McCarthy this offseason. I think that if they're smart, they will understand that why would we trade JJ when we don't have to? So they're probably going to sign Sam Darnold to a, 3-4-ish year deal. It's not going to be the Baker Mayfield deal. He's going to get more money than Baker Mayfield. But, maybe like a 4-year deal or something like that. And then you've still got JJ McCarthy for next year of Sam Darnold. And if he plays fantastic, okay, then great. Then you're trading JJ McCarthy next offseason. And if Sam Darnold signs the big contract, then he falls flat on McCarthy on the roster. So I think that that's probably the way that we're going to go about things here with Minnesota. But my most disappointing is an area that I'm definitely worried about with the Packers moving forward, and that is their lack of pass rush. It's not been great from a pass rush year outside of, Edgerrin Cooper, and Devontae Wyatt's been playing well as well. I want to give those guys their flowers, and they played well even in this game. But like Rashawn Gary and just a lot, mainly him. I mainly look at Gary and it's like, man, it's got to be way more impactful. He is on pace for his lowest pass rush win percentage in the last 4 years, his lowest pass rush grade in the last 4 years, and I believe his lowest total pressures over the last 4 years. He's got to be so much better for you moving forward. And I just think the pass rush in general this year from the Packers, and specifically in this game, was not good enough. They need an impactful pass rush presence on this team, and maybe they will go about drafting one of those players, but man, they got a lot of names on this defensive line. It's just not showing up the way that you need it to. So to me, the Packers' lack of pass rush, given all the names that they have on this defensive line, and in particular Rashawn Gary, has been disappointing this year and was disappointing once again in this game.
Yeah, I think combining those two things that you just mentioned with Sam Darnold and the lack of a pass rush, I thought even as plays were kind of lengthening and he wasn't quite getting to his first read right away, I thought he was really calm in the pocket and really getting to his second and third read and when he needed to improvise. He improvised very, very well. So, Darnold continues to prove it. I'm with you. And I think even for J.J. McCarthy, as young as he is, and he's still very talented, I think it could work better for him in the long run, honestly. Because, if you give Darnold a 4-year contract, how these things go. 2 years of it'll be guaranteed and then see where it goes from there.
Right.
I think the Vikings have all the leverage in the world here. I think with McCarthy sitting back there learning in this system, he's 21 years old right now. I don't think there's any issue. I mean, why not? We've seen the Packers do it with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. We've seen the Falcons tried to do it with Michael Penix for a little bit longer. But no, I think they're in a great situation, and I'm with you. I think I wouldn't let Darnold out the door with the way he's playing.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you come one today.